Hello and welcome to the Musical Instrument Investigator. Today we're on the website of French auction portal Share, and we're going to have another look at an auction by Vichy Auctions, a French auction house that are quite well known for selling musical instruments. If you're a regular viewer to the channel, you will see that recently I did another auction catalogue by Vichy. As I've said on a few videos before, they tend to have quite a few auctions throughout the year. Some are pluck strings, some are bowed strings, and then there's some other more kind of budget or student things. This particular set of auctions, of which this is the second one, there was one for the November the 29th. I've done a video on that, so have a look at the channel if you're interested. That was kind of lower tier instruments. This particular one, this is the middle auction, November the 30th. This is kind of, yeah, your mid-tier kind of stuff, a lot of French stuff, better things, a few other kind of higher level kind of items. And then the last auction, which will be a separate video on the 1st of December, that's the 1st of December auction, that's the higher level stuff, and that'll have some really special kind of things in. So this particular auction, the buyer's premium is 24%. There's 441 items, so quite a lot really. In the past I've tried to look at every single item, but really there are just so many, and you get a lot of kind of the same kind of French instruments in these auctions, although they're really nice. And in this middle tier they're getting a lot better than the ones in the first auction. It is still a little bit tedious to go through everything, so I'll just do my best to pick out a few instruments and bows as we go, and then I'll put a link in the description, and you can always check out the auction yourself if you want to look at it in more detail. So as I always say to people, this is a French auction, so if you're looking to get anything shipped, then check the terms and conditions, CITES restrictions, all of that stuff. Especially if you're outside of France or outside of Europe, it might be more complicated, so do make sure that you look into that. Anyway, without further ado, let's kind of crack on and see what we can do. As this is a slightly better auction than the other one, it might take us a little bit longer and we might look at a few more things, but let's see if we can make it fairly efficient. So let's start off with the first one here. So we have an 18th century French violin with an Amati label, saying 1500 to 2000 euros there. That's the estimate. 359 length of back, looks like an interesting enough instrument there. We've got a few more French kind of trade violins there, Lebert Humbert, JTL, but of the better level there. Also worth looking at, but like I said, we're a bit limited here, so let's have a look at here. We've got a violin by Julien Levesque in Montlecan, 1937, 1500 to 2000 euros there. A very typical French looking instrument. Got a Breton there, like an earlier French. Lucien Schmidt violin Grenoble. Let's have a look at this instrument here. Got a 20th century German cello in a Baroque setup, 5 strings bearing the label of Eugene Sprenger, 1953, good condition. So there you go, that's a Baroque 5-string cello there, 1000 to 1500 euros, you don't always see those. Got a Mirecourt 20th century cello, another 20th century Mirecourt cello here. Then we've got a 20th century Mirecourt violin. Let's have a look at an 18th century violin by Augustin Chapuis, made in Mirecourt, 1766, 2 to 3000 euros. Those of you that kind of watch my reviews of these auctions, especially the Vichy French ones, you'll know that I quite like the output of the Chapuis workshop. I think they made quite a lot of instruments in different grades, but I am quite a fan of them. I think this is a slightly kind of better one than some of the ones that you get. Let's have a look here. Let's pass that German instrument. Let's go past that. Got another French violin by Paul Hilaire there. This is be an interesting instrument to look here. Violin by François Pillemont, made in Mirecourt around 1820-1830. 1500 to 2000 euros there. It's quite a dark brown varnish there. And we'll move on. Let's have a look at this Charles Bailey violin, Mirecourt 1929, 1000 to 1500 euros. Okay, we'll try and look at some of the more modern French instruments as well, but like I said, there's so many things to look at, we can't look at every instrument. 19th century violin there, labelled John Delaney. Let's actually have a look at that. Minor restorations. Okay. Another Lebert Humbert, violin by Francois Barbe there. Another Lebert Humbert, violin by Albert de Blay, violin by Jenny Bailey there. It's interesting. Violin by Christian Olivier and Paul Bisch there in Paris. German violin from around 1800. Let's have a quick look at that. Violin by Leon Mougenot there. Violin from the House of Cousineau. Let's have a quick look at this one here. It's a violin by Seraphine Bourgeois, made in Geneva in 1866, 1500 to 2000. It's got a sound post crack on the table. Interesting looking violin there, 361 length of back, fairly long. Quite a nice looking instrument, needs a bit of kind of TLC, but interesting nevertheless. There's a few other photos, I think. Definitely a lot better auction than the last one we looked at. We've got Morizot bow there, viola bow in the style of Fonclaus, Bazin there, Francois Lot. These bows are getting obviously a lot better quality as well. So Usha, Morizot, JTL bow there, Bazin, Morizot, Francois Lot, Bazin, Lebert, Lamy. It's all the kind of who's who of French bows. Thomasin, Jean-Joseph Martin, Roger Francois Lot there, JTL, Eugene Cugnot, Pierre Malin, Eugene Cugnot, Auguste Rau, Joseph Thomasin. All the kind of names you expect. Bazin bow there, another Bazin. Let's have a look at a JTL bow here. JTL bow made 1880, inspired by Jean-Joseph Martin's model, silver mounted. So just two pictures on that, 1200 to 1500 euros. Let's have a look at this Mirecourt violin here. Violin by Georges Apparoux, Mirecourt, 1920-1930, Guarnerius model, 355 length of back. It's got a sound post crack in that table. Another Mirecourt violin, end of the 19th century. Charles Jean-Baptiste Collas Mazat Père violin there. These are very popular, so maybe we should have a quick look at this. 1887, 1500 to 2000 euros. These are always quite popular. It's got the signature in there as well. German violin, second part of the 19th century. Always got to look at all the 18th century French violins. Oh, it's got a Salomon label. Let's see if the scroll has any interesting kind of decorations. No, that looks fairly kind of plain. So it has a Salomon label, but they're not kind of attributing it to 361 length of back, 2 to 2,500. It's the estimate there, Lebert Humbert. This is another interesting one here. Violin by Jean-Baptiste Frebrunet, made in Mirecourt, 1770. 357 length of back, 2 to 2.5. Needs a bit of attention there. A few more images. It's interesting violin. Another Lebert Humbert. Not to say anything against these, but there's a lot of them about. Violin by Albert de Blay. Let's have a look at this 18th century viola. French viola, made around 1770, 1780, 403 length of back. Interesting F-hole placement and just general outline, slightly unusual. 1500 to 2000 euros there. Yeah, it's an interesting viola, that one. French violin, 20th century. Early 19th century violin with a label for Pietro Pallotta. Okay, 1000 to 1500 on that. Interesting violin from the eastern countries. Okay, let's have a look. 20th century. Hard to say, 1200 to 1500 on that. Miracle violin, early 20th century. Another Miracle by Leon Mougenot. Lebert Humbert there. 20th century violin with a Scarabotto label. That's giving that a big estimate. Let's have a look what we've got here. 352 length the back. Okay, certainly looks a little bit different than some of the others. 20th century violin there. 20th century violin. Other kind of slightly odd 20th century violins there with a label, an iron mark for Giorgio Corsini there, 2.5 to 3. Yeah, interesting. Another JTL there. Violin Dolling, another Colin Mazar. Violin by Pierre Augustin Mochard. Let's have a look at this. Interesting purfling there. 361 length of back. It's got the double purfling, but quite wide. Okay, 1000 to 1500 on that. Let's have another double purfling one here. Late 19th century violin labelled Scavia Camillo Alessandro. Loose rear sides, 361, 2 to 3000. They're putting on that. It looks kind of a 19th century work. Got a Fretschner bow there, Morizot. Lot, Eugene Cugnot, Morizot. Bazar, Cugnot Huri, more Bazar bows there. Prosper Colas, Joseph Morizot, Alfred Bazar. Pierre Malin, Emile Francois Huchard, Morizot. Charles Nicholas Bazar, Morizot, JTL again, Bazar. German School, another Fretschner bow there. Pierre Malin, Jean-Joseph Martin. Let's have a look at this bow here. Made around 1880, frog of another bow by the master and rear button mounted in nickel silver, deformed slide, small head bump, rising. Okay. 2.5 to 3000 for that one. Got a Roger Jerome Viola bow there. Violin bow Morizot. Violin bow Jean-Joseph Martin. Another 19th century Miracle violin there. Albert Clodeau workshop there. Lebert Humbert, Colin Mazar. This is an interesting viola. Viola by Marius Richelme, made in Marseille in 1871 there. 419 length of back. 1000 to 1500. Interesting shape there and scroll work, something a little bit different there. Violin by JTL, violin workshop of Clodeau, cello by Lebert Humbert there, modern viola with the Polar label. Let's have a look at this violin. French provincial violin made at the end of the 18th century with the Palermo or Paris label, head replaced, 359 length of back. Yeah, looks of the period there. Violin by Adolphe Stahl in Zurich. It's a Corsin. Can be quite nice violins. Violin by Francois Corsin, made in Ruse-la-Chétive around 1850. 1000 to 1500 there. 367. Wow, that's quite huge. Interesting kind of painted varnish on the back there. That's quite curious. Another Miracle violin there. This is slightly curious F-holes. Violin from the workshop of Ewald Bruckner, made in Marknikirk in 1921. 1000 to 1200 there. Kind of Guarneri-ish kind of F-holes, but very, very narrow. 7/8 German cello there. Violin by Lebert Humbert. Louis Scherpetel violin. Violin from the workshop of Amédée Dudouin, German violin, 20th century. A Colin Mazat violin there, 19th century French violin. It's a Miracle viola there from the 20th century. 409 length of back, it's quite a good size even. Interesting kind of quite wide lower bout, 1500 to 2000 there. Violin Miracle 1900, another violin JTL. This is an interesting one. 3/4 18th century cello, probably from the French school, bearing a Guarnerius label, 1500 to 2000. Don't often see too many 3/4 18th century cellos, or I haven't in any case, so that's an interesting one to see. A few interesting bows here. Viola bow, made in the style of Nicholas Leonard Tort, ironwood, circa 1800 there. Broken and missing head, 1000 to 200, yeah, 1200, yeah, it's definitely missing the head there. Morazon bow, Marc Lebert bow here, another Morazon. Pacat school, JTL bow there. Bazar, more Bazar, Morazon. Gilles Duhaut, German school bow, Francois Lot. Another Lot, Bazar, Emile Francois Huchard, Bazar, 3/4 Sartre, that's an interesting one while we're looking at 3/4 things. Sartre 3/4 violin bow stick, made around 1890, rear frog and button mounted in nickel silver. Okay, small knocks, end of knot, one of which is open, cracks in rear stick knot, leaving a chip and fractured head. Okay, 1200 to 1500 is the estimate on there. Bazar bow there. There really is quite a crazy amount of things here. Bazar bow, Orchard, Morazon, Roger Francois Lot, Lebert. Here's a frog from Arthur Vigneron, Joseph Arthur Vigneron. Violin from the Maire Pajot school. German violin here of the older type, 1760, some restorations, 362 length of back, 800 to 1000 there. 20th century Mircourt, Paul Bish Mircourt, Jean Larcher Mircourt. Let's have a look at this. Gustave Villiam, made in Nantes in 1947, 1500 to 2000 in that kind of Guarneri-ish style as well. Small viola from the German school, the 18th century. Sculpted head. Let's have a look at that. Oh yeah, it's got the lion head. It's a shame we can't see the front of that. Kind of slightly different to some of the usual lions that we see, so that's a fairly interesting one. 380, yeah, it's quite a small viola. Violin, Colin Mazar here, another Colin Mazar violin. This one actually looks like it could be a bit nicer. This one 1927, 1500 to 2000, the kind of Guarneri type. And modern violin, let's just have a look what that is. Very difficult to say exactly, it looks quite nondescript, 700 to 800. Here's a cello with Albert Jacot label, 2 to 2,500. Looks like the neck is detached currently. Violin by JTL, a half-size Mircourt cello with a Strad label, 1000 to 1500. Violin from Leon Mougenot workshop, Lebert, French violin around 1770. Table replaced, French from the 19th century. Okay, 1500 to 2000 on that. Lebert Humber violin, Julien Levesque. Violin by Leon Mougenot. Another French provincial violin. Second part of the 18th century. Needs a bit of repair there. Broken heel and traces of worm. Let's have a look at this 18th century German violin with original neck. Breaks on the splint of C. It's like fairly low tier kind of German violin there. Mircourt 20th century. Violin by Michel Quatreau. Julien Levesque. 19th century Mircourt violin there again. Another 18th century German violin with a Zanoli label. 1500 to 2000 there. Interesting looking scroll. We've got some more bows here. Violin bow by Clasquin, violin by Morazon, Varin, Prosper Colas, Joseph Morizot. German violin bow, Charles Nicholas Bazar. Cello bow by JTL. Violin bow, Francois Lot. Violin bow, Eugene Cugnot. French violin bow, let's have a look at that. Made around 1840 in exotic wood, bone button. 800 to 1,000 years. Interesting kind of transitional bow almost, with the interesting head, a bit more swan-like, like some of the Baroque bows. Good Fretschner bow there, 3/4 by Miquel. Violin bow JTL, viola bow from the Picat school. Bizarre bow here. Not even halfway through this auction yet, so it really is pretty crazy. Cello bow from the Picat school there, Francois Lot. Charles Nicholas Bazar bow in ironwood, 1890. Mounted in ivory, 800 to 1,000. Then we've got a Joseph Morizot bow, Pierre Cugnot, Morizot again, Louis Joseph Morizot. Violin bow of the Martin school, another Martin bow. Composite violin from Marcus Oboe label. Okay, that's interesting. Traces of worm. It's kind of quite curious looking violin. Miracle violin 1903. Miracle violin 1840s there. Another JTL violin. Miracle around 1770. Violin by Michel Quatreau. Violin by Jean Picot in Algiers, 1945. That's interesting. It's very Guarneri-esque there. German violin around 1770, 1780. Head replaced. Mirecourt Grand Gerard violin, late 18th century. Let's have a look at that. Okay, 800 to 1,000. As you can probably see by now, we've got a bit of a trend really of things. It's quite repetitive in a way. German violin, probably German, 1780. 2 to 2.5. Quite nice kind of back actually on that. Scroll looks like it's losing its eye. That's quite a nice, interesting choice there. Got a double bass, so we've got to have a look at this. Half size Miracle. What else do we have? Jean-Baptiste Lacombe violin. Violin by Lucien Andre Rago. Another 18th century French violin here, circa 1760. Replaced scroll. In need of some work. Violin by Charles Maurice Cabassa. Another Leon Mougenot. Violin of Marius Didier, Matincourt, 1940. 20th century violin with a Blondelet label, 18th century violin there. Robert Humbert. Let's have a look at this. A violin by Amédée Dudouin, Miracle, 1940. 1,000 to 1,500. 3/4 cello, probably from the 19th century German school. The label of Lannoy, 1,300 to 1,500 euros. 19th century violin there. Iron mark on the heel. Clark in Glasgow. Interesting purfling there and crackleture to the varnish. Okay. Violin from the 18th century German school with a Ruggieri label. Needs a bit of work there. Back to bass, Cugnot, Eugene Cugnot, Bazar, Louis Bazar, Picat, more Bazar bows there. Finkel there, it's like a modern Swiss bow. Viola bow there, 800 to 1,000 euros. These are pretty good for students and things. Marc Lebert bow, Francois Lot, Bazar, Francois Lot. Another Finkel bow there. Oh, this is an interesting bow. Violin bow by Jean-Yves Matter around 1985, signed by designer C. Hebert. Okay, that's an interesting looking bow. Yeah, custom red leather case. Yeah, that's really interesting. Wow, interesting head. It always reminds me of like something from the Alien film. like kind of the face protruding. It's an interesting looking bow. Oh, okay, interesting, and like a design of it. That's quite cool. 1,500 to 2,000 euros. That's one of the more interesting from a design point of view. That's really quite interesting. Well, I wonder how it kind of performs for a player. That's a really interesting bow. I need to keep note of that for myself. Francois Lot bow there. Let's have a look at Bazin bow, Prosper Colas, Joseph Morizon, Kurt Gerhard Penzel bow, double bass bow by Charles Lapierre, Joseph Morizon, Eugene Cunot, Francois Lot bow again, and Morizon, another Morizon here. Small late 18th century viola from the German school, made in Mittenwald. Okay, 800 to 1,000. 385, it's on the small side, but it's not too bad, nice enough. French cello, let's have a look. French cello made in Paris around 1700. Headstock replaced, worm. Definitely needs significant repair. It's quite nice, quite like some of these 18th century French cellos. Lebert Humber violin there, German violin 20th century, more German violins. Louis Colonneau violin. That's a viola by Marius Richelme, 20th century. Another Dolling, Mark Kirkin, Maginot, Lebert Humber, modern cello, 20th century violin. Violin by Joseph Charles Chipotle Viaume, 19th century French violin. Cello by Rudolf Mouchand, made in Mirecourt, 1830. Looks like it's missing it's got some of its neck. That's so that the worms have been eating that. That's been their dinner. That's going to need some serious work if it's even salvageable, but interesting in any case. Violin by Jean Streibig, Mirecourt, 1947. There's a lot of kind of these Guarneri model violins in this auction, I have to say. Okay, let's see this violin. Rare and interesting violin by Francois Javier Carachereau, made in Paris, 1934. Okay, interesting. Don't know this maker at all. 1,500 to 2,000. So interesting. Violin by William Lowe, made in Sunderland, 1881. Okay. 360 length of back. 800 to 1,000. Violin by Jean Peticolas there. Violin by Jean-Francois Barbe, another one there. Another French provincial violin, 19th century. Needs a bit of TLC. Half-size violin by Nicolas Viaume. It's pretty worth having a quick look at. Made in Mirecourt around 1850. Good quality half-size violin. Another Colin Mazal Workshop, German cello, 20th century. Violin bow by Lot. Violin bow by Cuneo Huri. Viola by Joseph Harmand. Morizon bow there. Violin bow stick by Francois Jude Gauliard. Pacat school bow there. Let's have a look at this Simon school bow. Violin bow stick from the Simon school, an exotic wood, made around 1860. Okay, 1,000 to 1,500. Got Morizon bow, more Morizon, Bazar, Lot, Ouchard, Joseph Gold. Some nice bows in this workshop. This is an interesting bow. French cello stick, made around 1790. Exotic wood, frog and button from the same period. Okay, 800 to 1,000 euros. It's an interesting head and button, actually. That's super kind of small head there, and this interesting button and frog. So that's quite curious, in fact. Cuneo Huri bow there, Bazar, JTL, load of different frogs there, Bazar, Penzel, JTL, Bazar, Morizon, Lebert Humber violin there, another Mirecourt violin. These are quite like the work of Didier Nicolas Ain. I find quite interesting. 1800. This is a bit rough and ready. That one, 1,000 to 1,500. JTL and August Friedrich Meisel violin there. Klingerthal, Lebert Humber, 20th century violin. Another JTL, more JTLs. 20th century violin, modern cello, probably by Louis Fussell, made in Bedford. Okay, interesting. Well, that is a curious instrument, isn't it? I suspect amateur work there. Let's have a look at this 18th century violin, labelled Christian Wohlfahrt. Okay, interesting. Musical cello, 19th century, Lebert Humber, modern viola, de Blay. Let's have a look at this small size viola by Joseph Thiriot, made in Mirco around 1800, 1000 to 1200. Okay. 19th century violin. Let's have a look at that. With the Calcanus label, 1200 to 1500. It's quite a nice back on that, actually. Quite interesting. This scroll head comes quite far forward. Then violin by Joly, Mirco, Paul Didier, 20th century violin, German violin or Eastern countries, 19th century violin, violin labelled Nama Leon. Okay, that's interesting. We have a look at this one. Okay, slightly odd. Charles Jean-Baptiste Colin Mazin violin. Then we've got Cello German School. We've got Lot, Morizot, Cunha Huri, Bazin, Lot, Granier, Morizot, Francois Huchard, Morizot, German cello bow. And Huchard, Morizot, Pierre Malin, Bazin, Bargenet, that's the first Bargenet in this auction, Bazin, Morizot, Richaume, Morizot, JTL, Rydell, Lamy, Emile Auguste Huchard. 3/4 Mirco cello here. Violin from the workshop of Amédée Dudouin. Violin by Louis Courtier. 20th century violin. 19th century violin. This one's quite interesting. Violin of the Grandjean School, Mirco, around 1860. 1000 to 1200. Okay, quite long. 364 length of back there. German violin, early 20th century. Colin Mazin violin, Lebert Humber, 20th century. Small size viola by Nicolas Mathieu, made in Mirco, 1800. Typical French looking violin. Let's have a look. It's a Vienna school violin, made around 1800 1810, labelled Dallinger, 354 length of back, 1000 to 1500. Violin by Claude Fougaroles, made in 1978 in Nice, whose label it bears, 356, 2 to 3,000 euros there. Well, it's very tidy, quite nice actually. Yeah, oh, interesting scroll there. Yeah, curious like final turn there on that scroll. That's a tidy looking work, 2 to 3,000, interesting. Large size Mirco violin around 1850. How large? 368. Wow, that is pretty large. 1000 to 1500. This kind of interesting purfling here that you sometimes see on some of these instruments. Leon Mougenot, 19th century. Mougenot, JTL, Lebert Humber, Leon Mougenot. German, 20th century. Colin Mazin. German violin, 20th century viola. Morizot, Lapierre, Huchard bows, Bazin, Thomasin, Bazin. I mean, this is an absolutely huge auction. Like, you could spend hours, and I'd spend hours before just clicking on a few, just clicking through everything and not really saying much, a bit like I'm doing now, but at least I'll stop on a few more things here. Bazin bows here, see like the different ones here. Lot more Finkel bows, quite a lot of Finkel bows in this. Picat School, Lot again, Bausch School, Morizot, Francois Lot, Pajot, Lot again, Bazin, JTL, Bazin, Lot again, 20th century Mirco violin, violin by Sebastien Quatreau, 1850 for the 1855 Paris exhibition there, 358 length of back. Okay, interesting. Fancy, I think. Oh, it's got one of these horrible heads, 2 to 3000. So let's move on from that. Another 18th century French provincial violin, different restorations. Okay, 3/5/6 length the back, 5 to 7. Yeah, it's a nice looking violin. It looks like it's had some work done to it, so probably in use fairly recently. Got a Breton violin here, or Mircore, Lebert Humbert, JTL, Paul Bish, 20th century violins here. JTL is another Chapuis violin, 18th century. I think this is an example of one of the kind of maybe slightly lower level Chapuis violins, lower than the other one that we saw, 1800 to 2000. Some of them can really look like quite modern, almost like they look like early 20th century violins with the quality of the varnish. It's really quite strange. Here's an interesting one, Viola by Vincent Shreve, made in Nantes, 1994. Interesting crackleture here on the varnish, 419. That's a good modern viola size. I quite like the wear and the crackleture. That's quite cool, quite interesting. Like that, 2 to 3000. That's pretty good. Violin by Prosper Cabasa. A few more bows here. Double bass bow, Simon. We've got Gauld, violin bow, JTL. Lot again. Cugnot, Morozon, Catherine Baron. Bazar again here, Cugnot, Bazar. Let's have a look at this Clasquin bow, circa 1920. Okay, slight chip on the top of the head. Let's see. I think it's referring to that bit there. Interesting bow, 1200 to 1500. Morozon, Bazar, Francois Houchard. I think we're on to the last page now. Cugnot, Huri, Lebert, Finkel, Weidhaus, Bazar, Pacat, Lot, Joseph Martin, Bazar, Morozon, Frère. Well, there we go. We've just kind of sped over this auction super quickly because there's so many things, and you could probably click on every single one of these bows or violins and find something interesting. I dare say a lot of these kind of Lebert, Humbert, JTL violins that I avoided probably have really nice backs. They look probably quite nice, and with a bit of setup they'll be kind of okay, but there's just so many of them in these auctions that it's just really a bit tedious to go over them. But anyway, another kind of solid auction here by Vichy. Definitely some good potential things if you're interested in buying stuff at auction. I'll put a link in the description to this catalogue. Definitely worth kind of checking it out in more detail. I've just gone over it really briefly, obviously, because there's too many things, but it's definitely worth your while if you're looking for a violin or a bow. Yeah, so I'll basically leave it for you to investigate things a little bit further, and I'll catch you next time. Ciao. Many thanks for tuning in to the Musical Instrument Investigator. I hope that you enjoyed the video. If you did, then please like, subscribe and turn on notifications, and watch out for the next video coming soon.